Events Part 2. In our previous class, we went over the focus, blur, hover, keyboard events, mouse events, as well as toggle. And included in that, we also learned what this is, and how it's not an event, but it is the current selector in the event. Now we're going to learn about click, double click, and submit. We've seen this already in a couple of our examples in the events part 1. This event is super important. Without it, websites would be a lot less interactive, and most people, when they want interactivity, will click on something on that web page. For example, when you want to interact with a video, you click play. It will start playing. So that being said, most people also dislike it when the web page tries to be interactive without their consent. For example, pop-ups, tutorials on how to use the website, what's new on the website, or even just videos that automatically start playing, such as advertisements. To solve this problem, we use the click event. And here's what the syntax looks like. We have our selector here, click, and then our function. And inside of our function is where all the code is going to go after we click the selected element. So here's our example. We have ID, element ID, and when we click that, we're going to select input with the ID of name. We're going to focus on it. Then we're going to select the same input, ID of name, change the CSS. We're going to change its border to a 3-pixel solid black border. Now let's click the button and see what happens. It added our border. It has a 3-pixel solid black border. That other color that you see around there, that is actually the outline. If you want to get rid of that, the CSS for that is actually outline, and it's a little bit different than border. So without the click event watching the button, we would never be able to focus on the input section without confusing or annoying the user. But if the user decides to click it and then something happens, they already expect that. Thus, they will not be annoyed and they will not be confused. And just so you do know, confused users often leave your website because they don't know what's going on or their attention has been kept on the page. And what I mean is if I was to click this, and again it just focuses on here, that's not a big deal. But if I click this and then the whole page inverted colors and then started flipping around, all the text started getting scrambled, the user right away is going to go, this is weird, I don't really want to be on this web page anymore, it's not useful to me. Next we have double click. This, like most of our events, has the same syntax as the click event. The difference is that the user has to click twice on the selected element in order to trigger the function. So here we have button, ID of double click, and the event is actually just DBL click. Then we have our function, and inside that function is where we're going to put our code. So let's see what happens when I click it once. Nothing's going to happen. I click it twice. Moderate speed, nothing's going to happen. I can just keep clicking it like this and nothing is going to happen at all. But if I click it twice really fast, it works. And that alerts us with double click, which is exactly what we told it to do. Now this isn't used too often, mostly due to the fact that users now want to interact with websites, but they want to use the minimal amount of effort possible. So most people just click once. Then we have submit. We can tell a form to submit using the submit method. We would usually use this after using JavaScript or jQuery to validate some information from a user who filled out a form of ours. Instead of having a button in the form that has type is equal to submit, we can change that to type is equal to button. We can then add an event such as .click and validate the information. If the info passes our validation, which is our filtering process, we can then submit the form for the user. So as an example here, what we have is our form method is equal to get, action is equal to myform.html, and our ID is equal to form1. Then we have input, type is input, ID is name. We have another input, type is equal to button, and ID is equal to validate. We close our form, we open a script. In our jQuery here, we have our selector, which is form number 1. That's right here. We know we're going to select this, and it's going to select all the children elements. And what this is saying is once we click inside the form, anywhere inside the form, it's going to submit this. So that's not really too useful because people aren't going to have the chance to actually put in their information. But if we actually change this to, let's say, validate, so we have ID validate, which is input. Someone clicks that, we could then put in here. So in here we can now put in an if or else statement. So if the value of ID, which is equal to name, is not blank, then we can submit it. And that would look something like this. where we have our if statement, our selector, ID is equal to name, dot val is the value of this, so whatever we would type in there, and if it does not equal nothing, because we just have open quote, close quote, there's nothing in there, so if it is not blank is what we're saying, then we can submit this form. So as you see, we replaced the submit button, where here used to be submit in our regular form, now it's just button. And then we added a jQuery event. Now this might seem like a lot of work right now, especially when we could just use input type is equal to submit. But then we wouldn't be able to validate the information. And what if someone left that field blank, but we needed that field to be filled? Also want to throw a note in here that this is not a full example of form validation. Form validation will actually take the value of every input that the user puts in. It will check it to see if the length is right, if there are spaces in there, if there shouldn't be spaces in there, if it is numerical or non-numerical, things like that. That would be what validation is. This is not really a good example of validation. This is just a quick demo to show you how we can use the submit method. Now there are a few more events to add to this. For all the events, you can go to http://api.jquery.com/category/events. And this will give you a full list of all the events that are available in jQuery. Also, if you find that you need more events or you want to learn about a specific event that isn't covered, you can simply request it. Now, we do have some homework here. This is optional, so if you do not want to do this, then don't feel pressure to do so. However, this will be great practice. First, I want you to write your own codes from scratch for every event that we covered, and then I want them to alert you when the event is triggered. This way you know when they work. What I mean is like in here, where we have our event, right? Our selector, dot click. Click would be the event. And then in here, we would just write alert test. And then we click it, and when it alerts us with test, we know that it works. Now you should be able to do that with every single event that we went over. And because the syntax is pretty much the same in just about all of them, to the exception of hover, that really won't take as long as you might think it will. Then I want you to create a simple click event that is attached to a button element. Inside this function, make it do something. Make it hide, make it toggle, change its CSS, something like that. I just want you to get a good feel for these events because we will be using events a lot more often, and you will see them in many, many more examples in the future. And again, I just want to let you know that homework is in fact optional. You do not have to do it. It is just good practice for you though.